times have you guys been to a dinner party where there's an exquisite home, fabulous hosts, elegant guests, and a table set for the Queen of England? And at each place setting, there's a name card where you really don't know who you're going to be sitting next to. Well, I had that experience recently, and let me give you some context. Anybody who knows me and knows me very well knows that I don't know anything about sports at all. Despite having 3 sons, growing up with 4 brothers, I just don't. Went to LSU, just don't know anything about sports. So much so that one year, I was asked to introduce Mike Ditka at their off luncheon, and I had no idea who he was. And I remember going to my dear friend Gary Rodemeyer at WHAS, said, Gary, who is this guy? I mean, is that the round ball or the oblong one or the small one with stripes? I mean, what do I say? And Gary said, Jean, just tell the truth. And so I stood there with my colleagues snickering in the background while I just said, yeah, I don't know who you are, but I sat next to Dan Issel, basketball Hall of Famer, played professional basketball in the ABA and NBA, general manager and head coach of the Denver Nuggets, been a broadcaster for NBC, ESPN, among others, and was on the ABA champion team with the Kentucky Colonels in 1975. Yeah. Well, I didn't know any of that at the time. But what I do know was that he is one of the nicest, kindest, funniest people that I have met in a long time. And I so enjoyed chatting with him for a good hour and a half or 2, and it went on and on. And what I do know is that he's now in Louisville, hoping to change the face of our sports culture, leading a team working to lure an NBA franchise to Louisville. And he's here to talk to us about it today. Come on up, Dan.
Thank you.
But now your first job is to draw for, what are we drawing for, Barry? Tickets.
Actually, certificates.
Certificates for tickets. One drawing or 2?
One drawing.
One drawing. Okay. Here you go. Close your eyes. Okay.
And now,
It's too late now.
I can't see that.
I can't either. Let's see. I didn't bring my glasses. Thank you, Dad.
Thank you, Jean.
Oh, no,
Thank
no,
you.
the problem is this is a blank one and there are several blanks. Here, let me just fill that out.
There you are, Barry.
Oh, okay. No, that's blank too.
Okay. One more time. That's a blank one too, isn't it?
It says ticket on the back.
They're all blank. Gene, where are you going? Get back up here.
Here, we're prepared.
Barry, there's a number. Read the number.
Read the number. Now you tell me. Look, number 883577.
Ready? Thank you. Thank you all. It was a pleasure being here with you today. Little pressure with showing the top 10 list before I got up here to speak. Gene, thank you very much for that kind introduction. Every time I hear myself being introduced, it reminds me of the very first time I was asked to do anything like this. I just finished my senior year at Kentucky, and the high school in Paintsville asked me to come up and speak to their basketball banquet. Well, I'd never done anything like that and was kind of nervous, but they said, Coach Rupp, who I played for at Kentucky, is going to come along and make the introduction. So I thought that was pretty cool, so I thought I'd try it. About a half hour before the banquet was to begin, we got word from Lexington that Coach Rupp had taken ill and wouldn't be able to make it. So they picked a gentleman out of the audience to make the introduction, and I'm sure he was chosen because of his standing in the community, not his knowledge of the game of basketball. Because he came to the podium and he said, they tell me this man needs no introduction. I said, I hope that's true because I never heard of him before. So hopefully a few of you have heard of me before, and I can't tell you how happy Sherry and I are to be back in Louisville. Our 5 years here playing for the Colonels was a delight, and I'd like for Sherry to stand up. She and I have been a team for a long, long time, so stand up, honey. Still the prettiest cheerleader Kentucky ever had, right there. And I'm proud to say that Sherry and I have been happily married for 37 years. Unfortunately, we just celebrate our 49th anniversary. She hates that joke. After we graduated from the University of Kentucky, we came to Louisville, and a lot of people have asked me, why did you choose the ABA over the NBA? And it was very simple. Sherry was born and raised in Lexington. After coming from Illinois to play at UK, I had fallen in love with the state and with the people, and the ability to come just 75 miles up the road, play with my dear friend Louis Dampier with the Kentucky Colonels was an easy, easy choice. And the ABA at that time was kind of turning the corner. My graduating class, 3 of the 6 consensus All-Americans signed with the ABA. And then the following year, we of course added Artis Gilmore to the Colonels, and players like Julius Erving, George Gervin, George McGinnis, all Hall of Famers joined the league the following year. And the ABA had a real advantage over the NBA because at that time the NBA still had a rule that your college class had to graduate before you were eligible for the draft. It didn't matter if you went to college or not, you couldn't be drafted till 4 years after high school. And the ABA had no such rule. And that's how we signed all of those talented young players, or a lot of those players, because they left school early, like McGinnis and Julius Erving. And because of that, the ABA really became as good a league the last few years as the NBA. And in 1975, as Gene said, we won the ABA championship. And it was the greatest feeling in the world. We were really, really living the life. We had just built our dream home out on Wolfpin Branch Road. We had started our family. Our daughter was 2 years old. We were champions of the ABA. And about 2 months later, I found out I had been sold to a team called the Baltimore Claws. And we were devastated. We didn't think they could have a team in Louisville without us being a part of it. But it worked out great for us because we went to Denver. We wound up in Denver. Denver was one of the 4 ABA teams that was merged into the NBA. But it wasn't so good for Kentucky Colonel fans because the Colonels weren't one of the teams that went. And that was a great basketball team. Stop and think. There are 4 members of the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame that were connected with that team. Artis Gilmore is in the Hall of Fame. Louis Dampier in the Hall of Fame. Hubie Brown, our coach, in the Hall of Fame. And it really is a shame that that team wasn't included in the merger. A friend of mine sent me a blog just yesterday, and the blog was about the greatest sports teams that no longer exist. Number 1 on the list was the Canton Bulldogs, who went undefeated, if you can believe it, the first 2 years of the NFL. Then there were a number of baseball teams that played in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And number 7 on that list was the Kentucky Colonels. And again, it was probably a sound financial decision. John Brown has taken a lot of flack because he didn't include the Colonels in the merger. But you have to remember at that time, the NBA was nowhere near as popular as it is today. As late as the late 1970s, the NBA championship was played on tape delay after the 11 o'clock news. And it wasn't until David Stern, the commissioner, started individually marketing the great stars of the NBA like Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, that the league really took off. And we were fortunate that we were in Denver and we got to play 10 more years there. And then, as Gene said, I did about everything you could do for the Denver Nuggets. I did the television, did the color on the TV games. I was coach on 2 occasions. I was a general manager, and it was a great life. Bernie Bickerstaff was the general manager of the Denver Nuggets. By the way, a plug for the Kentucky Hall of Fame. Louisville Sports Commission has taken over the Hall of Fame, and the inductions are going to be next month over at the Muhammad Ali Center. And Bernie Bickerstaff is one of the inductees, Bob Baffert, Sam Ball, who played at Kentucky football. It's a great class, and if there are any tickets left, if you're a sports fan, I think you'd have a terrific evening. But anyway, Bernie stepped out on a limb for me and hired me as the coach of the Denver Nuggets when I had no coaching experience whatsoever, had never coached at any level. And I took over a team that had the worst record in the NBA 2 years in a row. We were 20-62, and then the next year we were 24-58. And that was the team that I inherited. And so opening night, you know, I want to look good. It's my first coaching job. So I went downtown and got a haircut in Denver, and I made the mistake of leaving 2 tickets on the dashboard of my car. And somebody broke in and left 2 more tickets. But that turned out to be a great experience. That first year we won 12 more games, won 36 games. The next year we made the playoffs by the skin of our teeth and made history when we became the first 8 seed to ever beat a number 1 seed in the NBA playoffs. We beat the Seattle Supersonics. But I've been out of baseball. I've been out of basketball for about 15 years. And when the opportunity came to come back to Louisville and be involved with the effort to bring an NBA team here, we jumped at the chance. It's so much fun to be involved in basketball again. And one of the big benefits we have, and I think a couple of them are here this afternoon, is that money has been raised to fund our effort. So when we go and present to a possible majority owner, we don't have to go in with our hand out. And those local businessmen and women that have funded this effort, sure, they want an NBA team. That's their number 1 goal. But also, it's a community thing. Bringing a major league franchise to the city of Louisville would change this community forever. And Louisville's ready for it. They really are. And what we have to do, and the disadvantage is that there's really no timetable on when the NBA would expand. When I called the commissioner and told him that I was coming here to be involved in this effort, he said, Dan, we're delighted that Louisville wants an NBA team. He said, but I have to tell you there is no timetable on when that might happen. He said it's not even in the discussion phases. And I can tell you the commissioner is passionate about getting this one and done thing taken care of. And I think his goal is to develop a minor league system like baseball has, with a AAA league and maybe even a AA league. And if a young man wants to go, thinks he's ready to play professional basketball, he can go right out of high school. If he doesn't, if he wants to go to college, then there has to be a commitment to continue that college career for at least a couple of years. They'd try 3, but I don't think that would fly. But the secret is the NBA doesn't want those players there early any more than the colleges want them to leave. I mean, you have outliers like Anthony Davis, Donovan Mitchell from U of L last year, who can go in and make an impact immediately. But those players are few and far between. There's a lot of kids who leave after a first year of college and never make it in the NBA. So that's what the commissioner wants to get accomplished first. But the reason we think expansion is imminent is for 2 reasons. Number one, there's going to have to be teams for all of this talent that they're developing at the minor league level to play for. And number 2, and this is the big one, there's an expression called BRI, basketball-related income. And right now in the NBA, I don't think suite revenue is involved in that, but everything else, ticket sales, television, radio, all of the revenue that comes into the NBA is divided 50-50. I think the players might have a point or 2 extra, but that's basically divided 50-50 between the players and the owners. Expansion fees, which we are guesstimating in an expansion era would be at least $1 billion or more. That is not RBI. That would be a windfall for the owners, and that would go straight into their pockets. I'd like to dispel a couple of things that are going around about the NBA coming to Louisville, and then we'll open it up for questions if that's all right, and I'll be able to answer what you want to hear about. Number one is Louisville isn't big enough to be home to a professional franchise. And I just want to point out there was a study that was in the newspaper just last week, if you saw it. It was by the Hunden Strategic Group, and the mayor of Richmond, Virginia, commissioned this group to do a study about the ability of different cities to host professional teams. And some of the things that this group looked at were market size, wealth, population growth, and of all of the cities in the United States, and I'm assuming Canada because Vancouver was in one of these categories, Louisville was number 2. Number 2, Austin, Texas was number 1, and Austin would never get an NBA team because they're within that 75-mile radius of an existing team in San Antonio. So really, Louisville for an NBA team of cities that don't have any other professional sports would be number 1. The other thing that they came up with was a list of cities, all cities, that would be able to support a professional basketball team. And that list was Seattle number 1, San Diego number 2, Vancouver number 3, and Louisville number 4. But if you look at that list, the thing that popped out to me immediately, Seattle, San Diego, Vancouver, they've all had NBA teams that didn't succeed. And so I would think that we, for Louisville, could make a very compelling case. The one thing that isn't in this study is the passion that Kentuckians have for basketball. And I think we could make a very compelling case that we should have one of those expansion teams. The second thing I want to talk about is that an NBA team here would be competition for the University of Louisville. And this is one of my favorite stats of all time. In the 9 years that the Kentucky Colonels existed, the University of Louisville's men's basketball attendance doubled. While the Colonels were here doing business, Louisville's basketball attendance doubled. And they recruited some of the greatest players that ever played at Louisville. Wes Unseld, Butch Beard, Wesley Cox, the list goes on and on. I know the former regime at U of L didn't want the competition of the NBA, but I hope that Coach Mack and Mr. Tyree have a different view on that and see it as a complement to their program, like Coach Cal did in Memphis. When the Grizzlies moved to Memphis, Coach Cal said, "This is great. This gives me another recruiting tool." Because all of these young men, they all think they're going to be the next Michael Jordan. And so if U of L or Kentucky is recruiting a player and say, you know, by the way, you can go right down the road here and play professional basketball, that would be a real plus. The third thing is the cost of the tickets. Now, you know, when you go to the Derby, you can go to the infield, or you can buy a table up in the mansion for $30,000 or $40,000. It just depends on where you want to sit. And professional basketball, I will admit, is the same way. Courtside seats are very expensive. Lower bowl seats are expensive. But I can't speak to the University of Louisville. I don't know that story. But I can speak to the University of Kentucky. I'm a season ticket holder. Sherry and I are season ticket holders of UK basketball in Rupp Arena. The seat tax on our tickets are $5,000 a piece. So when you add the cost of the tickets to the seat tax, those tickets get real expensive in a hurry. And, you know, at UK, you get the rest of the SEC schedule. You get the University of Louisville every other year. And last season, we got Harvard and Utah Valley. I didn't even know there was a Utah. How many graduates of Utah Valley do we have here today? So I'm kind of picking on my alma mater, but you get the point. There might be some bad NBA teams that come in here, but at least it won't be somebody you never heard of before. And our economic models are based on an average ticket price of $46. And when I tell people that, they're shocked. But that's what our economic models are based on. So I'm having a blast. We are talking to real estate developers in New York, Washington, D.C., that want to come in and take a look at it. We have 2 more meetings out of town next week, and we will get that majority owner. And at that point, we will be able to build a compelling case so that when the NBA decides to expand, Louisville's application is on the top of the list. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. Thank you. By the way, if you're playing Rotary baseball, the Chicago Cubs are who's going to win the World Series next year. I'll just give you that little tip right ahead. Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm Larry Sloan, and we really appreciate your coming and talking today. It's been a great talk. What about an arena for this pro team? What's the deal on that?
That's an excellent question, and I try to stay away from that. But I think some of you might have seen the financial situation with the Yum Center in the paper last week. And with the lease that U of L has, it would be very difficult for an NBA team to play in the Yum Center. Now, I have not met Mr. Scott Cox. He is the chairman of the Arena Authority, but I did see him quoted saying that having an NBA team in the Yum Center would be challenging but doable. And so I'm going to hold him at his word. And why wouldn't you want to play in the Yum Center? I mean, it would be one of the top 5 or 6 NBA arenas immediately. It's a beautiful place to play. But what's interesting is that we have an option. A lot of cities don't have an arena at all. We have 2. And I mentioned that we have a group from New York City and a group from Washington, D.C., who are real estate developers that are interested in coming in as the majority owner, or at least they'll listen to our story. And they are interested in taking a look at Freedom Hall and developing a lot of that ground around the fairgrounds. And so, you know, obviously our first choice would be the Yum Center. I think that would be everybody's first choice. But we have options if that doesn't work out. Thank you. Did I dance around that politically?
Dan, a couple things. First of all, holy cow, that was definitely a 5. When I fill out my survey,
Thank you very much.
it's a 5. It's definitely a 5.
Gene, you tell me what he says next week, okay? Thank you.
My question is, with all the super teams, I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the NBA. With all the super teams, Golden State and all, it seems like the smaller markets, it's difficult for them to stay competitive. I wonder if you could kind of talk about that.
Well,
aspect
and
of
not
the
only the
game.
smaller markets, I mean, Oklahoma City is kind of the one that we hold up. And I don't know if you remember the history of Oklahoma City. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans and devastated the arena where the Pelicans played. And so New Orleans moved to Oklahoma City for a whole season while they redid the arena in New Orleans. And it was wildly successful. And then Seattle, who were turned down to build a new arena up there, the Sonics couldn't wait to get to Oklahoma City and take advantage of that enthusiasm. And so that's kind of the market that we compare ourselves to. And you know, there's Oklahoma State and the University of Oklahoma not far from Oklahoma City, just like U of L and UK. Here's what I know, Ken. When we get a team, the first couple of years, we're going to have a honeymoon. I mean, people are going to come because it's new. You know, the NBA's in Louisville. Louisville's a major league. And I keep saying Louisville, but we have a huge market between Owensboro, Bowling Green, Covington, Lexington that we can draw from. After that honeymoon period, we better be putting a good product on the floor. And if we put a good product on the floor, and that'll be up to us, then I think we can keep that enthusiasm and that attendance going. If it's a bad team, I'm not going. Hi, Todd.
Hi. Hey, Dan, thanks for being here today. Love hearing you speak. Big fan of the project that you guys are working on, and I think it's a great idea for the city. My question is, can you speak a little bit about the bigger picture? So economic impact for businesses, additional tax revenue, potentially from the players or other revenue sources.
Right.
And then where this puts us in the scheme of things of keeping young generations and actually attracting young talent to the city.
That's
the big impact of what
That's
you're doing.
great. That's a great question, Todd. And I don't talk a lot about it because, to be real honest with you, you know, I don't know a lot of the particulars. But you're absolutely right. This city is a well-kept secret. Do you know, at one time, Louisville was about the same size as Cincinnati and Indianapolis and Nashville. And those teams, just for whatever reason, whether it was short-sightedness on our politicians' parts, but for whatever reason, those teams just soared right past us. And have you been to Nashville lately? They've got more building cranes in Nashville than they have in New York City. And I think, for several reasons, I think Louisville's about to turn the corner. I have a dear friend, Mark Vaughn, who is president of Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Mark called me right after he saw that I took this position. And he said, Dan, you're on to something there. He said, with the new hotels, the new facilities, the bourbon branding, we're seeing Louisville more and more be convention competition for us in the city of Atlanta. Go back to what I talked about, the minority owners. They've put up the money to seed this effort. When I interact with them, I see the same vision. You know, Louisville's about ready to explode if it isn't exploding already. And that just benefits everybody.
Dan Hartledge with Guthrie Mays Public Relations. You kind of touched on it, but could you expound a little bit on just the timing, how this might play out in the years to come? And
That's a great question, and I guess we'll end with that one. I can't. I know that the commissioner wants to get, the first thing on his list is to get this one and done thing straightened out. I would guess, and I'm just guessing, that expansion would be the next thing. And is that 2 years away, 3 years away, 4 years away? I can't guess. People ask me, what are the chances of this happening? And again, you know, we're going to make a compelling argument. We're going to make sure that the NBA and its owners sit up and take notice of what we're doing here. But I can't give you a percentage. All I can tell you is I know what the percentage is if we don't try. 0. Thank you.
Dan, what you just experienced is extremely rare in this outfit. You've catapulted yourself to the top of that best 5 list. He's a 6. Do one thing today, if you would, please. Do one thing to make Louisville more of a home. Thank you very much.